To look at how Australia compares to the often long and expensive elections in America, our guest tonight is Dr. David Smith from the United States Studies Centre at the University of Sydney, and he is joined tonight by Stephen Scott and Ian McPhedran. Welcome to you all. Dr. David Smith, can I begin with you? The Australian Electoral Commission reports that our last federal election in 2007 cost us $163 million. This might sound like a lot of money to Australians, but it's small fry when we compare it to the United States. Would you agree?
It is really small fry. It's hard to estimate how much is even spent in US elections, but it was somewhere between $2.5 and $4 billion last time around. Obama's team managed to raise $800 million in 2008. And in 2009, they were already saying this isn't going to be enough this time around. Romney is likely to be the candidate. He's very rich. We need to raise twice that. We need to raise $1.5 billion. So there are huge amounts of money at play in American politics.
So does that suggest that the party with the more money is more likely to win? And if that indeed is correct, what does it mean for us here in Australia?
Well, in the US, the party is virtually irrelevant. Ever since the Supreme Court decision in 2010 that allowed in basically unlimited money from corporations, unions, associations, it's actually been players outside the parties who have been the most influential. And yeah, this is very influential on deciding not just who wins the presidency, but who wins congressional races, even who wins races at the primary level. If some wealthy donor gets particularly attached to some candidate and injects $10 million into the race, that can be the turning point.
Didn't we see, though, that Obama didn't raise as much as the Republicans, and yet he still won? So money doesn't always have the deciding factor.
Doesn't always have the deciding factor. What Obama also had was a very experienced campaign team who had won before. And also, it's really emerging that the Democrats had the technological edge in this race. We often see one party has a big technological lead over the other. It's not always the Democrats. In fact, often it's historically been the Republicans ever since Nixon who have usually held that advantage. But Obama had it this time.
So by technology, you're talking about social media and what other technology?
Social media and also techniques for getting people to people's houses, getting supporters out to vote, being able to predict who the right voters are and being able to call them from the massive amounts of data that these campaigns keep on voters. It is no exaggeration to say these campaigns have data on nearly every voter in America, and they spend an enormous amount of time trying to work out who should we be targeting to try to make sure that they actually go to the polls.
Well, Dr. Smith, I know that Stephen Scott, who also is joining us tonight, has some interesting questions on the digital dream team that Obama brought in. Stephen?
Yes, well, Kevin Rudd's team has made a big deal about getting some of Obama's campaign whiz kids out here. How do you think that's going?
I think that might actually be a little bit misguided, because what we see in American campaigns is that the most effort is actually devoted to getting people out to the polls in the first place. In the final stages of the campaign, especially, and in a stage like now where there's only a few weeks left, nobody's really changing their minds anymore, or not that many people are changing their minds. And the effort is all about, we have our coalition, we have our supporters, we have our people who might want to vote for us. Because voting's not compulsory in the US, though, we need to actually make an effort to get them out. And one of the edges that the Democrats have really had is getting their supporters out. So that's what I think Obama's team is actually really good at. And I don't know if this is actually going to help in the Australian context. I mean, they may well have something else that's really important, that's probably very secretive and that we don't know about. But what we do know is the Obama team was just very good at getting people out to vote and identifying people who are on the cusp of maybe voting but maybe not. And I don't see how that's going to help Kevin Rudd or Labor at this point.
So do you think it matters how many
We've seen
Twitter... Oh, sorry, after you, Stephen.
Oh, I was just going to say, we've seen Kevin Rudd make quite frequent use of the social media. He likes tweeting, sending photos of himself. Do you think that's an example of US style campaigning?
Yeah, certainly. Kevin Rudd has really embraced social media, probably to a greater extent than any other Australian politician. Social media in the US is very, very useful for the leadership of the party to communicate very, very quickly with activists, to immediately work out what are today's talking points, what are the things that we want you to circulate around the media, what do we want you to go and talk to other people about. And this is certainly the way that Labor is using it. It's a way of communicating with activists very, very quickly. So I think that this is something that Kevin Rudd has very effectively adopted from the US-style campaign, but once again, not quite so important in a context where you don't need to persuade people to vote in the first place.
So more selfies to come, I think.
Definitely more selfies to come.
Dr. David Smith, thank you very much for your insights.
My pleasure.